Gregor MacGregor was born in the latter half of the 18th century in Stirlingshire, a picturesque region in the heart of Scotland. His family could have been the stuff of epic legend. His grandfather, a celebrated warrior known as Gregor the Beautiful, was a shining star of the MacGregor clan, one of the oldest and most storied in the Highlands. The clan traced its lineage back to the ancient Celtic kings of Alpin and had endured centuries of brutal persecution. In the 16th century, the Scottish crown outlawed them, even forbidding the very utterance of the name MacGregor. But Gregor's grandfather refused to yield. By the 18th century, he had restored the clan's honor and reclaimed their right to bear the name. This legacy of pride, rebellion, and ambition seemed to burn deep in young Gregor's soul, fueling his dreams of greatness. At the age of 16, Gregor joined the British Army and bought the rank of ensign in the 57th Infantry Regiment. This was a common occurrence for the sons of wealthy families. Within a year, he was a lieutenant, a few years later a captain. Yet his promotions owed more to money and connections than battlefield heroics. He saw action in the Peninsular War, but the details of his service remain hazy. In the year 1810, Gregor unexpectedly left the army under mysterious circumstances and soon went to South America, where there was a struggle for independence from Spain. A year later, he landed in Venezuela, where revolution was gaining momentum. Wasting no time, he offered his services to Simón Bolívar, the legendary liberator of Latin America. Presenting himself as a seasoned officer, Gregor quickly won trust. His British military background and charisma helped him rise swiftly through the ranks. He took part in daring raids against the Spanish in Venezuela and New Granada, led an unsuccessful assault on Portobello in Panama, and even briefly seized Amelia Island off the coast of Florida. Hailed as a romantic hero, Gregor eagerly embraced the image, bestowing upon himself grandiose titles like Commander-in-Chief of the armies of the Venezuelan and New Granadan republics. Though official recognition of these ranks was often lacking, Gregor shone in stories more than on the battlefield. He adored flamboyant uniforms, grandiose proclamations, and embellished tales of his exploits. Contemporaries questioned his leadership, and many of his campaigns ended in failure. Yet he remained impossible to ignore. By the early 20s of the 19th century, his fame in South America had faded. Gregor returned to Britain and decided to start a new act of his life. Then he came up with Poyais, a non-existent country. His scam unfolded on a scale worthy of the best adventurers. He painted a vision of paradise, fertile lands yielding 3 harvests a year, rivers glittering with gold dust, a thriving capital graced with theaters and palaces. This was the dream the Scottish adventurer sold to hundreds, convincing them to invest in a fictional nation. There was just one problem: Poyais didn't exist. The scheme began when MacGregor traveled to Honduras in Central America. His attention fell on the Mosquito Coast, a vast 30,000 square kilometer territory stretching along the eastern shores of Nicaragua and Honduras. This land was controlled by the Mosquito people, an indigenous group that had maintained near independence for centuries. While the British had once taken interest in the region as a buffer against Spanish influence, their presence had dwindled by the 19th century's start. There, MacGregor met with George Frederick Augustus I, whom he grandly styled King of the Mosquito Nation. Though the chief's actual authority was limited, Europeans often treated with him. A silver-tongued negotiator, Gregor convinced George to grant him a substantial tract of land. No evidence exists that this transaction actually occurred, and even if it did, British and international law wouldn't have recognized its validity. But MacGregor didn't care. He had a gift for making fiction sound credible. In his telling, Poyais became a promised land. Rich soil teeming with crops, rivers overflowing with fish and game, welcoming natives. He described it as an earthly paradise with enlightened laws and boundless natural wealth. To sell this fantasy, MacGregor launched an unprecedented publicity campaign. He gave newspaper interviews, hired writers to produce pamphlets, and even commissioned ballads about Poyais that echoed through the streets of London, Edinburgh, and Glasgow. For added authenticity, he published a book titled Sketch of the Mosquito Shore, including the territory of Poyais, purportedly written by an impartial observer. The book described Poyais as an earthly paradise. Its climate was proclaimed exceptionally salubrious and perfectly suited for European constitutions. The land proved so fertile that farmers could harvest 3 crops of corn a year or cultivate sugarcane and tobacco with minimal effort. Rivers and forests teemed with such abundance that a single hunting expedition could feed an entire family for weeks. The capital, St. Joseph, was portrayed as a flourishing coastal city with tree-lined boulevards, colonnaded buildings, and opulent mansions, complete with an opera house, a grand cathedral, a parliament building, and even a royal palace. The authors went so far as to claim the rivers contained nuggets of pure gold. MacGregor began selling plots at 2 shillings and 3 pence per acre, equivalent to a laborer's daily wage, making the offer irresistibly affordable. Demand proved overwhelming, and when he raised the price to 4 shillings, buyers still flocked. Over 500 investors purchased land, many staking their entire life savings. But MacGregor didn't stop there. He issued Poyaisan government bonds worth £200,000, an astronomical sum for the era. To validate his scheme, MacGregor organized an immigration program, specifically targeting his fellow Scots whom he believed would trust a countryman. He promised to populate Poyais with hardy and upstanding Scots capable of building a new nation. Craftsmen and tradesmen were offered free passage, supplies, and lucrative government contracts. Hundreds enlisted as settlers, bankers, physicians, civil servants, young military officers. Even an Edinburgh cobbler appointed as official shoemaker to the princess. Thus 2 ships, the Honduras Packet and the Kinnersley Castle, set sail for Poyais, carrying about 250 hopeful colonists dreaming of prosperity in their new homeland. Their visions of an established colony quickly dissolved into harsh reality. Impenetrable mosquito-infested jungles contained no settlements, no government, no infrastructure. Stranded without support, the settlers soon fell victim to disease, starvation, and despair. James Hastie, a Scottish woodsman traveling with his wife and 3 children, later wrote, "It seemed fate itself had conspired to destroy us." The Edinburgh cobbler, who had dreamed of crafting shoes for Poyaisan royalty, ultimately took his own life. When rescuers finally transported the survivors to British Honduras, modern Belize, over half the colonists had perished. Back in Britain, news of the catastrophe spread like wildfire. Investigations soon revealed Poyais to be pure fiction. Sensing danger, Gregor MacGregor fled to France, where, astonishingly, he attempted to run the very same scheme. French authorities grew suspicious when people began requesting passports to a country nobody had heard of. Investors, too, started asking uncomfortable questions. Where was the proof of Poyais' existence? In 1825, Parisian police arrested MacGregor and his accomplices for fraud. The trial became a sensation. Prosecutors presented damning evidence: forged bonds, fabricated documents, and imaginary maps. Yet MacGregor remained defiant. He insisted he'd acted in good faith, relying on what he claimed was a legitimate land grant from the Mosquito King. The Poyais colony's failure, he argued, resulted from unfortunate circumstances rather than deception. The man genuinely seemed to believe he could will a new nation into existence. To widespread astonishment, the court acquitted him. The verdict hinged on insufficient proof of intentional fraud. The era's legal standards required more concrete evidence than prosecutors could provide. MacGregor's associates likewise walked free. Though escaping punishment, the scandal ruined MacGregor's reputation in France. His days as a successful conman were over. He returned to London attempting to revive Poyais, but public interest had evaporated. Soon, he faded from view altogether. MacGregor eventually settled in Venezuela, where some still remembered his service in the independence wars. In an ironic twist, he was granted a pension as a national hero and lived out his days in comfort. The Poyais scheme remains remarkable not just for its scale, but for its sheer audacity. MacGregor invented an entire nation, complete with currency, flag, and imaginary citizens. He duped not just common folk, but financial elites. His actions bankrupted thousands and claimed over 100 lives, standing as one of the 19th century's most tragic frauds. The scandal so shook investor confidence that it contributed to stock market panic. Yet even after MacGregor's death, Poyais' phantom lingered. His name became synonymous with grand deception while the legend grew. Some claimed rusted anchors from settler ships still lay hidden in Honduran jungles. Old Scottish families reportedly preserved yellowed land certificates for territory that never existed. MacGregor himself never showed remorse. Among his papers, drafts surfaced for New Caledonia, another fantastical country with gold-laden rivers and miraculously fruitful trees. But this time, the world wasn't fooled. Poyais endures in history as a ghost kingdom built on lies and human dreams. And Gregor MacGregor? The man who nearly convinced the world that fiction could be made real. Nearly.